Oh, that's a lot of. Updates to the technology. It looked to me like I wasn't on. Here I am, just schmutzing around. I'm glad I didn't say anything terrible. Welcome, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here for another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon. Um, Sorry for that mistake. Not a mistake. Things happen. As you know, this is a show where I am celebrating the 50th anniversary of the game Dungeons and Dragons and the hobby of uh, role playing. Oh, that's what it was. I just solved the problem. Yes, hobby of role playing. All 50 years old this year, which is terrific, if you ask me. It's been a big part of my life. I've been involved in it as fun and as my profession, and that's why I want to celebrate it. I'm doing it with this show where I'm bringing on people that have been important and worked on the development of the game over the years, and I'm having fun conversations with them. Many times they are people I worked with, and that's true this week. And I have the man who was my very first boss at TSR, Harold Johnson. He's been a editor and designer and brand manager and just about everything else you can be for the game, going all the way back to the very first Dungeon Master's Guide. And he's got more stories, and I know a lot of people have a lot of stories. I don't think anyone has more stories than Harold. So I'm going to stop talking about him and bring him on so that we can get to it. So here I come with, here's Harold. The hat that walks like a man.
The man in the hat. That's what they did for my first profile in Dragon.
Yeah.
Because I had the hat.
That hat is at least as famous as you are. Hello, Harold Johnson.
Hello. I did that so people can see I actually have hair. They all think I wear the hat because I'm bald, but no.
That would be.
Hey, Stan.
Hello, Harold. Yeah, so you're gonna be at Gen Con next week, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and
yeah.
So will your
I
hat.
go every year, right? And the hat will be there. Yep.
Let's see. Kevin Melka is here, and he says, "Oh my God, Harold actually made it." Carrie Beverus is here, and she says, "Harold."
Carrie!
And, Michael Pastor is here, who's not one of our former coworkers, but he's happy you're here too. Everyone, and Dale Donovan, he's on. He's the one who told me I was on. So we've already got a nice little, and there are more people who are chatting. So you've already got an audience, Harold. You have an audience, and I know how much you love an audience.
Really, I don't know. I'm feeling. I don't know if I'll come up with anything to talk about.
You relax, Harold. You'll be okay. I know this is your first time on stage.
Yeah, the first time.
All right. So Harold, let's just start at the very beginning. If you have to do like a convention or a bio for a theater thing, and you say who is Harold Johnson is, how does that go?
For a convention,
Yeah.
well, I talk about Harold Johnson was the former VP of Games, director of Dragonlance at one point. I also was director of Gen Con. A lot of people know about my from my 10 years with Gen Con as director. But I've also done writing and I've done editing, which was my first job there. And On the side, I'm also a professional puppeteer. I'm also a professional performer, voice talent. All of this before there was any uh, TSR or Dungeons and Dragons. It's how I made my money as a young man.
Yeah. You know what?
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to talk a little because of all the things I know about you, I know least about your uh, pre TSR pre gaming days. What? How were you? What is it you were doing there with the puppeteering and the voice acting and the? But what
Oh
was? How were
well,
you making your money? Because we know
at
that's
age,
an area that is renowned for
yeah,
bringing in the
at
bucks.
age at age 14, I tried out for a play, and I was trouble, and they actually cast somebody else. I was the runner up. I always was the runner up, and but I did voice recording for the show and got paid for that. And after that, I we had moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, kind of where Zeb is from. And while I was there, one summer I decided I'd be part of Show Wagon, which was a traveling wagon where the side would become a stage, and I was part of the crew. But then we were also the like the MCs in between acts
Mm.
because it was a talent show. And while I was doing that and I was doing voices, I was approached by a puppetry group, a professional group, and asked if I would record the voice of a prince. So I did. And then I just hung around till someone didn't show up. And I said, I can do that. And wound up, first thing I did was a prompter. It's the person who talks to the puppets.
Mm.
And I read The Raven, and the raven came out and pecked at my head while I was reading. So, and I just went on and just by the age of 15, they came to me, put me in a show, made me the star of it. I was juggler of Our Lady, and then came to me and said, "The next show, you're writing." I
Oh,
went, "I'm 15 years old. Are you sure about? Think of the promotion value of that." So I started writing, being a playwright, and I got paid for it.
wow. All right.
Yeah.
So, how did you come across this newfangled Dungeons and Dragons game when it came around?
Well, I was actually living in Nebraska for a while with my dad, who was a professor, and then he decided he was going to have an adventure, and he came to me and said, "Okay, quit college and come with me. We're going to have an adventure."
Wow.
What are we doing, Dad? We're going to move to Afghanistan, and we're going to teach at the University of Kabul in Afghanistan. And I said, nah, I
That's
don't think so.
that's an adventure.
So I came from Nebraska back to Chicago, which is where I was born, and my grandfather lived. And I was a legacy, so I got into Northwestern,
Mm.
and I was at Northwestern when the game premiered. But I didn't find out about it till I went home to Nebraska that summer,
Mm.
1975, and my brother Niram, and there's nobody else with that name in the world. Niram, it's a family name. Let's see, and there you go. That's how it's pronounced.
Wow.
And he said, "We got this game you got to learn." And they tried to describe it to me. And I went, "So there's no rules?" "Well, there are rules, but it's really making up stories. I can do that. I've been ad libbing for a living. I can do this." So I went and I played and I learned that summer. And then I went back to Northwestern and said, we were in a group that was science fiction historical perspectives through science fiction. And it
Mm.
was the biggest class attendance. There were 350. We were in a big auditorium. And I sat in the very front. And then I started talking to the people beside me about there's this new game called Dungeons and Dragons. Have you heard of it? And introduced them. So I was playing that back then,
Right. Well,
1975.
Jeff Grubb and Sue Wineline and Todd Lockwood have also joined us and say hi. Everyone's happy to see
Hi,
you.
hi guys. Look at the whiskers. The picture he did was without the whiskers.
All right. So, how then did you get to get to join TSR? How did that bridge get crossed?
Okay, it's a long story, so I'm going to cut it short. Um,
No, we got him.
I Okay. Well, I have a degree in biology. That's for what I got from Northwestern. I wanted to be a marine biologist, Jacques Cousteau. But I had a minor in history because I was bored in the last quarters of school. I'd taken nothing but majors. And so I took fun courses like historical perspectives and a lot of um, ancient Near Eastern religions, mythology. So I know Akkadian, Sumerian, Babylonian, Hittite, Greek, Roman, Zoroaster, and of course Norse. And in the process, I have since every place I go, I look up what the native folklore is, and that's why I enjoyed Mesoamerican too,
Mm,
Aztecs, Incans, Toltecs, and so on. Anyway, so I had graduated and been out for a year and not finding a real job. I was hiking cars. Um, and so I was kind of depressed about that. And I went to a Gen Con and I was told that they were looking for a editor. It had been published in Dragon, I think.
mm,
Maybe it was. So I went back and I picked up the phone and I called and I got Mike Carr and I said, well, you probably already hired somebody because it's August and that was July. But he said you won't know what you are missing if you don't give me an interview. And he said, oh, come on up. I didn't have a car. I live in Chicago. I have to get so I took the train up to Milwaukee and the bus down to Lake Geneva. Then I walked around town. But I did not get the job. Al Hammock was hired for the job. And so I went back home, happy enough that I had met Gary and met Dave Sutherland and
mm.
Mike, and thinking they don't know who I am. Little did I know I was wrong. But they then posted. Gary decided he couldn't run the company and write for Dungeons and Dragons. So
Right.
they were looking for a lead writer, someone to take over the reins from Gary Gygax and be the lead writer for the Dungeons and Dragons line. And they did a contest or a test. They gave me 100 questions, historical questions, and they asked for a sample adventure. And I figured, well, I can write a sample adventure. And we didn't have the internet back then, but I had Love's
Right.
Library. And so it was like a take home test. So I went and could research everything. I did not finish. I went to Winter Fantasy. And in Winter Fantasy, I asked somebody, Neil Christensen, if they had hired somebody, and he said they had. And I went home depressed. No. And when I got there, there was a letter, besides the fact that I left the window open and there was a freeze and it broke the pipes. But besides that, there was a letter from Mike saying, we're looking forward to getting your entry. And here's another 50 questions to answer.
Wow.
And here's the deadline, which was like the end of the month. And I abandoned what I was doing. I was doing the only living adventure ever written. It has not been published. It was a living Frost Giant's castle, and the occupants moved from room to room based on the time of day. So
Mm,
there you go.
yeah.
So I took what I had improvised that weekend for the adventure, and I wrote it up and I sent it in, and then I waited. And on February 9th, I got the a letter from them, and I didn't want to open it. I said, I don't need rejection. Thank you very much. Here they've sent me a letter. I'm not interested. I barely made it in. I only got them a certain number of pages of the adventure. They're probably just laughing at me. But I had only done it so they would offer me the job. So I could say, yeah, but you see, I'm really a scientist, so no thanks. No, really, that was my plan. And I was sticking by it. So now I had this letter. After about 45 minutes, I got up the courage to open it. And it started off, I've got this letter. I found this just this summer. Anyway, it says, it's from Gary Gygax, and it says, thank you very much for your contribution. It was really nice. We enjoyed the uh, adventure and we enjoyed the answers. They were almost near perfect. I'm going, duh, take home test. And by the way, I'm in a fight with Tim Cass. Tim wants to publish your adventure in Dragon Magazine. I think it should be its own product, which was a big thing
Yeah.
because, nobody was published but Gary. And I thought, cool, I'll have to finish it now. Um, and so I called them. I said, okay, now I'm going to let somebody know that I'm not taking the job. But I let my friends know, and they asked if I was insane. They said, "Do you know how many people
Good
want this
friends.
job?" And you're going, "I'm going to say no." So I did call, and I said, "Well, when do you want me?" And they said June 1st, and I said, and they said, "If you don't want it, we got this guy named Zeb Cook that we can offer the job to instead." Um, and I said, "Well, I guess I'll take the job, but I really want to come up earlier if you need me." So they called me in April, notice June 1st, April, and they said, an editor has just quit and we need him desperately to work on and finish the Dungeon Master's Guide. Can you come up because you applied to be an editor? Well, see, I wanted to be the writer, man. I mean, what do you mean, be an editor? So then Gary had to call me at home and say, no, no, Harold, come on up. It'll be okay. We'll promote you from within. Just help us out during this tough time. So I came up and never happened. I mean, I did design on the side, but nope, I was never made a designer. But I was the winner, just so you know.
Yeah.
This guy was
You.
supposed to be the lead writer for D&D.
All right. So before we go on, I'm going to switch views now and bring it over here. I'm going to be doing an homage to a 1998 adventure called A Darkness Gathering. It's Bruce Cordell's first adventure, I think. Um,
Oh, wow. You probably should start with blue, just so you know.
I'm
It's
going to
all
start with
blue.
blue. So I'm going to do that while we continue our conversation. So
All
you know
right.
what, Harold? So many
Oh,
of so much of my interaction with you has been over the years has been you were the person behind the scene, or you were the person who was supposed to do the thing, and someone else was the face, but you were the heart. So it doesn't
true.
really surprise me that you started your career that way,
Yep.
and it's carried through the whole way.
Yep. They didn't know what to make of me because when I started there, they would give me a project after Dungeon Master's Guide, which I wrote a chunk of, and they'd say, "Well, your next project is this," and I'd say to them, "No, it's not." They'd say, "What?" I say, "No, I'm going to answer the phones for Gen Con because in those days we only had Joe Orlowski organizing Gen Con and he was off site. And so we were getting tons of phone calls for people who wanted to attend. And I said, if you want them to attend, you have to have a voice here. So for about 2 months, I actually answered the phone for Gen Con, which is no surprise.
Right.
Uh, Going to go to the past very quick. In 1975, I learned the game. In 1976, a bunch of gamers that I had started with said to me, "You want to go to Gen Con?" And I said, "Yeah, that's way too far away and I don't have a car." "Oh, no, it's just across the border. You should come with us." "Oh, oh, okay. So what are we going to play?" Well, here it says, what's that one? It's a British game. I'm drawing a blank, old man mind. Anyway, they tried to tell me the rules. I got up there. I played 3 rounds, and I was the first runner up. So if everybody who made the final rounds hadn't shown up, I would have played. But that was the first year they did the D&D Open, and we went up as a team of 5, and we were immediately told we don't allow teams to play. We're going
Oh,
to, yeah, we're going to randomly associate you with other people. So I played, and we lost miserably. I was a cleric. These are all pre-gens. And
right.
then I spent the rest of the show telling everybody how terrible the adventure was.
It's
And
it's
and
frighteningly similar to
eventually,
Jeff Grubb's secret origin story.
sure, it does sound like it, doesn't it? So I got, they came to me and said, "You think you can do better?" I said, "I know I can do better." And this is 76, right? Before I came up in 79. So we're talking 3, 4 years before then. And I said, yes, I can do better. And they said, "You want to do an event?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do one next year." And they said, "No, not next year. This year, we have too many players and we don't have enough things for them to do. If you will run something, we'll get you players, we'll get you prizes." And I said, "Can I have a day?" I don't bring anything. I'll have to figure it out. And so we ran an event. We did a round robin with 3 referees. And in those days, I didn't know that it was appropriate not to finish an adventure. So
Right.
when I realized we weren't going to finish it in time, it was called the Blood Cup of Noth, I named it. Um, I said to the other refs, "Step away and let me do this. I can get them to the end real fast." "Where is it?" "In this dungeon." And the guy whose map it was showed me, and I said, "Okay, fine." And I had the next door open to corridor, but it was now a river. And they took off this big oaken door, made it into a raft, and they sailed down the river right to the site of the final encounter. And we played it out. But we were the last things running. We were in the middle of horticulture hall in the concourse where the plants are exhibited,
Right.
and there were a bunch of people sitting on the hill watching us play, and I was the last one jumping around, very active, trying to get to the point where I could declare somebody the winner. And we were the last game, and that was it. And after that, every time I'd go up to Winter Fantasy or Fall Revel or something, I'd have gamers come to me and say, "What are you running?" And I'd say,
It's
"Nothing. I came to play." And they'd say, "No, no, no, you got to run. You're great." I mean,
a
can you
problem
give
with
me
being
a
great.
little time? I'll invent something. And so I was always the last thing running, and there were people sitting there in chairs throwing big dice against the wall, and these were like pillows. They were
Right.
sewing dice and drinking coffee. So I always thought, as a result, that I sold myself to the company because they couldn't possibly know who I was. And about 15 years ago, I realized that the people who were sitting on the hill and were sitting in those comfy chairs in the American Legion Hall were none other than Brian Bloom, Gary Gygax, Mike Carr. So they did know who I was. Here, I thought I did such a great job selling myself.
Well, you did. It just wasn't when you sold yourself previously. You were pre-sold.
Yep. Who knew? Who knew? Is that it? Are you done?
I'm done. That's what it is. Isn't that great?
Yeah, I look at it. I can see it. I can see it.
Um, all right. So, you, as you said before, you've done almost every job there is to do, right? In the
Right.
company at one point or another. Um,
Yep.
what? Trying to figure out which question I want to ask first. What? What's the one that you think most people don't know?
Wow. Um, I don't think a lot of people knew that I was editor in chief.
Sue Weinlight says she thinks that you were in legal when she was a new employee. How did that happen?
Oh, very true, very true. I was in legal. I was the company historian at that point. A lot of people think that Steve Winter was the legal historian. No, I was, and I turned over my documents to Steve, and he rewrote them all. But yeah, I had become director without portfolio. I was director of games till 1986 when Gary left. And then I kind of floated till they made me director of consumer services, which is direct sales. So I oversaw Gen Con, the RPGA, the mail order hobby shop, that sort of stuff. And at one point, they even offered to have me move to England and set up there, but I said no. Um, and so during that time, I was that for a while. And then they were still saying Harold's an asset and we want him and he can get things done, but we're not quite sure where we need him. And legal said he has a lot of knowledge. We'll bring him over here. So that's why I was there for a while. And then Jim Ward came back on board, and Jim Ward brought me back into the fold of the game department. He made me a director of games, and I was director of, gosh, Dragon Dice, Marvel Super Dice, Dragonlance for a while.
Yeah, when I came on, and this is quite a while later, because you're talking about stuff previously, which is in the 70s and early 80s. I'm talking now.
Yep,
We're talking about 1995, which is when I came on, and
yep,
you were my manager. We had Ravenloft and Dark Sun, and the
yep,
Dragonlance Fifth Age was in the group at that point.
yep. And we were doing Ravenloft, and we did. That was really a lot of it was Bill Connors and Bruce Nesmith and Andrea Hayday, and I'm probably missing some other people. I put in my 2 cents worth. I think Jim Ward put in his 2 cents worth. I love horror. A lot of what I do has a horror, almost Lovecraftian basis to what I
Right,
do. Hence the gibbering mouther, which is very much a Cthulhian type monster.
right.
Um, so we were doing that, and we this was post Dragonlance. Dragonlance came out in 1984, and so a lot of people were trying to find a way to catch the same fire that Dragonlance did, and I think Ravenloft was one of those things that really made a difference. We had Dark Sun, which was an amazing thing, but it was kind of a niche market. We did Birthright, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, it hadn't been costed out, and every copy we sold cost us money because we didn't charge enough for it. Nowadays we would, but we didn't then. And But Ravenloft, even after I left the company in 2000, I actually worked with White Wolf and wrote some things for Mask of the Red Death, which was a Ravenloft.
I love Mask of the Red Death.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so but let's skip back to the earlier days. So you were
Yep.
one of the people who was on the original Dragonlance team,
Right.
right?
Right.
Together with
Yep.
Tracy and Margaret and Jeff Grubb and uh, uh, several other people. I understand that you had a lot to do with Hasselhoff or Hasselhoff.
Hasselhoff. No, no, no. That's the beach guy.
Right,
Yeah, Tasselhoff. Yes. No, actually, Tasselhoff is me. Yeah, absolutely. Um, what had happened was Tracy and Jeff both submitted a 3 module series to our marketing department. And marketing came back to me. They were about dragons. And marketing came back to me and said, "We're really excited about dragons. We have a lot of boys in our audience, probably 85, 90% were male. And dragons are dinosaurs of fantasy. So we want you to do a 10 module series. And I sat there and went, okay, let me think about that. But in those days, I would try and answer the challenge. So I looked at both of the outlines and I chose Tracy. And I said, Tracy, let's leave the premises. What had happened was when I came on board, we were over 2 years behind on publication of promised publication of product. And after I'd been there 9 months telling everybody what I was going to do, they said, we're making you a manager, which is why I didn't go back to being a designer. And eventually I became a VP of games. Um, and so I said, we are now 2 years ahead of schedule in 9 months after I was. And I feared that the company was going to find that out and that they didn't need us. They would say, oh, cool, we can always freelance stuff. We now have a 2 year window.
Right.
And so during that time, I had us doing blue sky projects. I quietly had us inventing stuff. And I took Tracy over to my house and I said, Tracy, let's come up with a story. Let's come up with a concept. How can we do a 10 module series about dragons? Because after you fight a dragon, kill a dragon, get his horde, why are you going to want to do that 9 more times? And so the two of us talked. I pace. People know that I pace when I story plan.
Yeah.
And during that pacing, we came up with everything that became the framework for the first 12 modules, and later was the inspiration for the first three novels. Um, in the process, I then named a team, and the team was Carl Smith, who didn't stay with us long, but Carl Smith, um, uh, Jeff Grubb, myself, and Tracy Hickman. Tracy was the one in charge of the Bible and did a lot of the background stuff. He created the timelines and a lot of the characters, but he tends to write an adventure by drawing a very complex map and then saying, let's do a play test. And so I went to his first play test and we had played, I think, uh, Oasis of the White Palm or Pharaoh, one of those two. And we wound up being teleported out at the end to another world. And I had a hobbit, a halfling, and named Al Martin. And Al plays through the first adventure, and he falls into the stream drunk with the drunk dwarf. And afterwards, they miss me because Tracy had us gave me a random magic item, and that random magic item was a ring of invisibility. So after the first play test, I thought, wait, a hobbit with a ring of invisibility. That sounds vaguely familiar. I
we've,
don't think we
seen
can
that
do this
somewhere.
somewhere. So we'll we'll replay this. And at that point, I was really annoyed with halflings who don't wear shoes. So I said, I'll come up with something else. And that's how Kender came to be and why they wear shoes. And Kender were the Lost Boys. They never grew up. And my kids think I based the Kender on them, and I didn't. I based them on my brother, Niram, because when he was growing up, he had a habit of, my dad would say, I had a hammer here. Anybody seen my hammer? I had a hammer here. Somebody's taking my hammer. I need who's got my hammer? Somebody has stolen my hammer. I want my and then we go out to the front porch and there's my brother with a hammer and hammering nails in a block of wood. And he said, didn't you hear me shouting? He said, well, nobody was using it. I said, ooh, I know what Kender do. They walk around and they go, oh, that's kind of neat. Here's my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I sat down, I'll pick up the hammer. So that's how Kender came to be. And I created the first one, and he said, what are you going to name him? And I knew I wanted to put my hair up in a big tassel. So I named myself Tasselhoff Barefoot. And that was the first adventure. that's how it came to be.
All right. Michael Pastor says, "You said you wrote part of the DMG as well as being the editor. What
Yes, true.
what parts did you write?"
Well, there were often things that I would find missing, and I'd go to Gary and say, "Do you have this part of the manuscript?" And he'd say, "I don't know what to do with it. Just write something." The most renowned parts are first. There was a section on how to destroy artifacts. It was a chart, and he didn't have it, and I wrote one, but I tend to overwrite everything, kind of like I overtalk and storytell. And my car said it all, and it was about, oh, I don't know, I would say about 9, 10 inches long. And he looked at this space on the page, and he took out a big pair of shears and he cut it off and left only 8 of some 56 ways you could destroy artifacts. And that's what got pasted. And I thought, that's it. I will never see the rest of that because it was typeset and then thrown in the trash. But this year, when I found the letter, I also found the original list of,
Ooh.
yeah, I have that piece of paper. So I also went to Gary and said, Gary, I can't find anything during the game. There's so many pages and I don't know where to turn to. You really need an index. And he said, okay, you write it. What? Yeah, you write it. Okay. Okay, I'll do an index. That's fine. And since there was never one done for Player's Handbook, I will include that too because it was for me. I want to be able to find
Right.
places and the rules. So those are the two most renowned things that I did.
Harold, I'm seeing a through line in your career, which is you do it okay.
Well, my standard is funny because I would never know exactly what they wanted, but I would say, "Oh, I can figure this out." When they brought me the need to do character record sheets, and in those days we sold them.
Right.
Um, they were out of print, and they wanted to do a new one. So I got out there and I looked at every copy I could find that fans had made, and ones we had done before. And I spent what was supposed to be 2 weeks became 2.5 months. Every day they'd say, "Why is it not done?" And I'd have to argue with them about why I was doing it the way I did. And in the end, we did 3 products because they said, well, we need something for the NPCs, and we could use a journal as well as a character record sheet. So we did that. Um, and I went to Dave Sutherland and I said, Dave, I need some art. And he said, I don't have time for it and I don't have any artists to do it. Fine. So I went home and I drew the art and I came back and said, can you ink this? So, like the little shoe and so on. Those are me.
Right.
I'm a published artist. I bet you didn't know that, like you.
Let's say,
Um,
you know what? I knew coming into this conversation that I was going to find out things I didn't know before.
if you look at the collector's version of Hidden Shrine of Temochin, there is art in there, and several pieces say HJJ and DCS3. DCS3 is Dave Sutherland. When he
Right.
told me I couldn't have art for this collector's version, I went home, grabbed my comic books, pulled them out, looked at. I'm a draftsman more than I am a wrote artist. And so I drew things in pencil and brought him back. And he looked and he said, these are pretty good.
Yeah.
Will you mind if I ink them? Oh, no, please do. And that's so, yeah, I got published there. That's actually where Diesel was first published too, Dave LaForce.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I did that. Oh, speaking of which, I guess if we're in the past, let's talk about demotion.
I was about to do that because you threw that out there, and that's another big part for you.
It was. In the first year I was there, I'd been there maybe 2 months, wrapping up a Dungeon Master's Guide, And Gary came to us and said to the design department, which did not include me, this would be Lawrence Schick, um, Dave Cook, Tom Moldvay. I'm thinking there was another one. And anyway, he said, I'm supposed to write the tournament for Origins this year, like I did last year. The previous year, he did the G series,
Right.
but I don't have time. So I want somebody here to agree to write the tournament. And all of the designers said, and the developers all said, no, no, we don't have time. No, no time. And nobody knowing my background and how I got hired for the company, I raised my hand and I said, I'll do it. And they went, really? And I'm like, yeah, an editor's going to write a decent adventure. And I went, okay. They have no idea. And so I pulled out the stops. I wrote the adventure, 3 rounds of tournaments. They play tested them. Skip Williams came back and criticized my writing and told me, you made it impossible. There's no way you can fight this were jaguar in here because you don't have magical weapons. I said, you don't need magical weapons. Yes, you do. No, you don't. What are you talking about? Well, it says you need a magical +1. It does not say a magical +1 sword or magical +1 weapon. There is a spell strength that one character has, and if it's cast on him, he will gain an 18 strength, and he will get a +1 to hit and damage. There's your magical +1. And Skip said, that's not how it works. And I thought, who the hell are you, kid? I, I'm the designer of this, and I'm hired to do this. So he went down to Gary and then came back. Gary called me and said, the kid's right, change it. So I put some silver coins in and a rusting +1 dagger. That was my nod to putting magical weapons in. But I did write it. And then Will Niebling, who was head of marketing at the time, came to us and said, you know what? We're going to publish this and we're going to sell it a quick print so we can pay for our gas to and from Origins. But it's not a finished product. It's just the tournament. And so he said, well, can you finish it? I said, I guess. And so we were working on typewriters. We didn't have typesetting. I
Right.
would go out to another place and nobody knew how to type except for me. Well, no, I don't think Kim Mohan was there yet. And Kim's a 2-figure typist. But I went to school in Iowa for a while, and it's required to know typing. So I could type. And I'd been writing since 4th grade when I was doing plays and stuff. Anyway, the I started typing, and I worked all weekend before they were be from Monday on because they left Wednesday morning. And I did not sleep for 48 hours straight, writing and retyping pages if I really messed them up. So that entire adventure was typed by me in the collector's set. And we pasted the art in. And then Jean Wells was a designer. Oh, that was one other designer. She was in the design department. Jean Wells put me into her bug, and we drove down to South Beloit Patch Press, who had a quick press there, and they printed it. And we came back, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, we left it on the steps of the downtown shop. And I went home to sleep, and they all went off to Origins, assembling the game, the adventure, and
Along the
putting it
way.
in. And then right now, that adventure sold for $4.50. If you have a copy of it, the latest version, it was Gary's copy, sold for $8,000. So if you find one, get somebody to sign it for you and make some
Quick.
money. Quick. Yeah, yeah, I may be gone, so who knows? I can sign book plates, I suppose.
You never can. Yeah, never can tell. Amy Ulan, hello, Amy. Amy says she's reading Kindred Spirits right now, and it's fun for her to get
Cool.
back into the world of
Yep.
Dragonlance.
Yep. Oh well, let's go back to Dragonlance.
Let's do
Books was
that.
my idea. Books was my idea. We're talking about these adventures and stuff, and in the process, I'm looking at it and saying they want us to do 10 adventures, one for each type of dragon. And I said, there's actually 12 dragons with the king and queen of dragons. So, there's 12 months in the year. We could do a calendar. They're always having problems making it profitable because they have to have unique pieces of art. But we would have 12 unique pieces for the covers of the product. So we just reuse them.
Right.
and and then we talked about miniatures, and we talked about the whole Tolkien milieu and how all these other things had spun off, fashion, music. That's why there's songs in it. Tracy wanted to have music. I thought it was a great idea, so we did music. Computer games was planned from the start, but I said, guys, you know what? We have an amazing story. This story should be published as books. And the company said, one, we don't do books, and two, we're not book writers. We don't know how to do it. Really? You need a professional author to write uh, our stuff? I don't think so, but if you need professionals, I know professionals. And I reached out to Chris Stasheff, the warlock in spite of himself, King Kobold. I was around when he was writing that back in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted $20,000 up front. And I was told $20,000 for work for hire was the top of the line. So you had to be a well published author
Right.
and I didn't think Chris Stasheff was. So I came back to the company and I said, we should do it here. And they said, okay. Margaret was the editor, and Gene Black was the head of books at that time. And they did tryouts, and they tried out, had people write up the first 25 pages based on our outline of the adventure.
Right.
And then they invited a guy who was the best of the submissions to try to write the book. And he came to a party, and just before the party, I said, "Let me see his submission." And I read it, and I said to them, "You know, we got to tell this guy not to quit his day job because there's some major problems in his writing here." Um, and so when I met him at a party they had at Rose Estes's house, I said, "What do you do?" He says, "I'm a teacher, but I've quit my job so I can devote it to the book." And I was like, "Oh my god!" And I don't know. About 3 months later, we paid him a kill fee and said it's not working out. And then Tracy came to me and said, "Harold, you and I, conceived this story. Well, the team did, but you and I know it very well. So we could write the books." And I said, "Tracy, I love the idea. And I can indeed write. But one, I will overwrite. Two, it will be really late. And three, there will be nobody fighting for this to happen. So it will be canceled." And Tracy went, "Huh." He said, you need me fighting the battles." And so he went to Margaret and said, "Margaret, you know this." And Margaret was a published author already, some children's books. And he said, "Margaret, you and I know this story really well. We can write this story." And that's how it came to be, and why my name's not the author. Oh, well. It was
So,
a good story. Tracy had a great story.
yes, and you know what? And it turned out pretty well in the end.
And it's not the end. What's happening this year? Their third novel in that final quintilogy,
Right.
pentilogy, is happening, is being released at Gen Con this year. And I actually have number one, number two. I'm going to get number three, and they're all signed by him. So, him and Margaret.
Um, so other than Dragonlance, were you in on the start of any of the other? I mean, clearly you were somewhere around the building. What other
Um,
what other?
Dungeons and Dragons. When it divided from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons and Dragons, we had the original Eric Holmes blue box, and it was decided that we needed to go beyond, and they were going to do an expert set. So Dungeons and Dragons basic set was just for first through third level, and so then they were going to do through middle level in expert. And I'm not sure I've got this 100% right, but Tom Mulvey wrote one of them, and I believe Lawrence Schick wrote the other. And they were given to me. At this point, I was manager of editing, and they were given to me late and not in great shape. And we spent Christmas um, uh, editing, developing those two box sets. That would be the purple one and the blue one, which has a reprise of the purple one's art.
Right.
And then Frank Menzer came on board, and we did the red basic, which, by the way, Frank wrote that and rewrote it 5 times till he was happy with it. Um, and I became the developer of his manuscripts. Um, and the editor was Anne McCready. Well, it was
Yeah.
Anne Brown, Anne Gray at the time. And she later became Anne McCready. But yeah, she's listed as the editor. I was the developer. So all of the D&D B, X, C, M, I. I'm the developer on those. So I had a lot to do with that. But as editor in chief, you'll find my name on every product from 1982 on to about 1986 because everything went through my hands. Sometimes I wrote sections. Star Frontiers, we got a partial turnover. And unfortunately, the editor got sick and was hospitalized. And we had to figure out from what was there how to make a finished product. So I put Steve Winter in charge of figuring it out. And I wrote, I said, I can write stuff for you. So I wrote the car chase rules and a bunch of other things and helped direct where the stuff was going for Star Frontiers. Indiana Jones. We didn't talk
A
about
lot,
Indiana Jones. I
a lot
got
of people don't
that.
remember that Indiana Jones' first RPG adaptation was TSR.
It was. It was. When I was there the first year, we were downtown. We were at the Hotel Claire, which is now Kilwins in a landmark center. And we'd go out to lunch, and I walked by the movie theater and saw that there was a sneak preview that midnight of a show called Indiana Jones and the Search for the
Raiders of
Lost
the
Ark.
Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't know what it was. I went back to our floor and I called a meeting. Yeah, like I had that power. I called a meeting of everybody in design, editing, art, and so on and said, guys, I don't know what this is, but it stars Harrison Ford and we all need to see this. So we went out and saw the premiere that midnight. And every year that they've come out with another one, they've done a sneak preview in Lake Geneva. So we've gone and seen it. And so I was a big fan of Indiana Jones, and I have the fedora.
Yes,
Um,
and you still
Actually,
do.
I was a photo model. Diesel was a photo model, but both of us, with our hats, became photo models for the paintings of Indiana Jones. I said to our marketing department and licensing department, wouldn't it be neat if we did the Indiana Jones role playing game? And they said, pack your bags. I went, what? And he said, we've got an appointment with Lucas Film and we're going to pitch it. And so then I pulled Dave Sutherland aside and said, these guys have no idea what a role playing game is. And if I try to explain about graph paper and pads of paper and dice, they're not going to get it. We've got to do something that looks more like a board game. And we had our own camera department, so I went there and I mocked up a board, and I took pictures of the collectible figures from Indiana Jones, and that made pillars, figures, triangular pillars. Those were the characters. Dave did cutaway walls and some other elements, and I put them in a box, wrapped it in brown paper, and put not craft paper, brown PMS paper, and then put the postcard for Indiana Jones on the cover, and took it out to them. I sold that like 5, 6 years ago for a lot of money. And I'm going, yeah, okay, it's just was my prototype to convince Lucas to give us the license, which they did. Lot The big lesson that Harold has to share with the world.
Yes.
They say, "How did you do all these amazing things?" Because I don't think I did incredibly amazing things. I just said, "Okay, let me try." But the lesson is when they say, "How did you do this?" I said, "Well, I asked." You know what? I said, "I just asked. Why is there a All My Children board game?" Well, Zeb had designed a great game for Dynasty, and Dynasty had withdrawn from the license, and I didn't want to waste the design. And I said, we should do something. And Mike Cook said, well, maybe we can do daytime drama. So he had a meeting. He called me. We went to New York, and I stood in the office of daytime drama and All My Children producers, and all women, by the way,
Yeah.
and made my presentation. And they said, we're very excited to have TSR do a game for us. This will be great. Just one thing, it's not going to be this piece of, they didn't use this word, so, but I'm going to be doo doo, you know. And I looked at them and I went, okay, all right. Went back to Lake Geneva and I said, I guess this is never going to happen. And about 4 weeks later, they asked us what the progress was. And I said, Jeff, write me some advertising copy. And he did. And we mocked up a box and sent it off to him with, a list of components. And they said, we love your game. We can't wait to see the finished product. I'm going, what game? It's a prototype. So I turned to Zeb and said, Zeb, help me figure this out. And he came in, told me and Gray the how to do it, and then Ann invented it, and she actually got together with the All My Children people because their cast actually came up with the goals for the various characters.
Huh.
He said, "Oh, Phoebe, her high goal is ruin her hairdo." It's like, really? Yeah, that's 20-pointer. Okay, you know better, but it's ask. Ask. The other answer is never give up. When someone says to me, "You can't do it," my response is, "Well, not the way we've done it up to this point. Maybe let me think about this." When about the second year I was VP, they came to me and said, it was like February, late February, said, we went to the toy fair and we promised Oriental Adventures for publication by Gen Con. Well, in those days, it took 2.5 years to go from nothing to a finished product. We'd write it, the editor would look it over, they'd make rewrites. We'd get it typed up, and then we would order the art and start typesetting. It was a long process. And I had March, April, May, June, March, April. I had 4 months to do something that took 2 years. And every other staff member came to me and said, you got to go to them and tell them it can't be done. And I said, well, not the way we've done it before, but it can be done. I tend to think of things in packets. And I
Right.
said, why do we do wait till the very end to do the cover art? We can do it now, but we don't know what it is. Sure, we do. It's Oriental Adventures. We just have to say to the writer, whoever it is, that you've got to include this cover in your manuscript.
Right.
Okay. Second, we can design it so that the art is not filler, but is illustration. Because I could order the art now. I don't have to wait till after it's written. So then I went to Gary and said, so show me what you got. And he handed me 20 pages of a 128-page product. And 20 pages is actually only 5 pages. This
Right.
is about 4 type pages, 3.5 to a page. And I thought about it and said, well, I'm going to have to freelance somebody. It's going to be somebody on site as well as in the evenings. And I went to Zeb, who was my go to guy. And Zeb said, well, I can try. Let me see what he wants. And so we read what was there. He had a bunch of questions. In those days, you didn't think you could talk to Gary because Gary was scary. He made some big proclamations and fired some people.
Right.
They were very concerned that you couldn't talk to Gary. And I said, no, 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 no. You can talk to Gary. This is easy enough. He said, here's what I want you to do, Zeb. Come up with 5 questions and we'll go and sit down with Gary. So he went in and he asked his first question. And Gary said, oh, well, this was my intention. Can you make that happen? And Zeb said, sure. And then he asked the second question. And Gary says, I don't know. What do you think? And Zeb gave him an answer. And he said, that's pretty good. And Zeb went to the third question. And Gary said, I trust you. You obviously know what I want. I will go ahead with this. And so then I had Zeb leave. And I said, okay, Gary, now we have to figure out how we're going to pay for this. And here's what I recommend. And before I got it out of my mouth, Gary says, well, I will share my royalty with him. What? Yep, I'm getting a royalty for this, so I will share my royalty with him. Okay, cool.
There you go.
So Zeb was more than happy to do it, and I love Oriental Adventures. It was great, but it was when someone said it couldn't be done. Certainly at a rush, and we got it done. And then everything I did from that point on was to figure out how to be more efficient and how to.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, that's one of the things I remember most clearly about being on your team was it was never about it can't be. It was like, how can we get this done? Right.
Right.
Here is the end goal. Here's where we are. What is possible between here? How can we get from here to there? And sometimes the answer was, well, we're going to have to change we can't meet all of these specifics, but we can meet this goal if we rearrange it that way. And I mean
Right.
that was a very good lesson for me that I've carried forward in projects all along. Don't get so married to the start. Think about what you want. Think about what you want at the end, and then reassess what can be done in the time allowed. And you know what? There have been times in my life when the answer has been, look, we just can't do that. But if you want to do a different thing, we can, we can't hit this big thing, but we can hit this smaller thing, which will springboard into the bigger thing eventually.
I used to recommend, and I know we did this with Alternity when we published Alternity. I said, we are not going to make the deadline. Can we do a show special? And, with a simple, unillustrated cover and so on. It's like, well, yeah, we could do that. Well, then we can get
That's what we
income.
can do.
And that's what we did. We actually, there's an Alternity copy out there. That was a science fiction game that didn't last from us. It was a hardbound book. And if it has an all black cover, you've got one of those show
I've still
specials.
got one of those around somewhere.
And
See,
I later,
David. David
Yes.
Wise. I missed a couple of comments. David Wise earlier said, "Who needs Indiana Jones when you've got Wisconsin Johnson?"
Thanks, Dave.
And Michael Pastor asks, "Was Jim Ward your boss?"
For a time, I was Jim Ward's boss. Later, Jim was my boss. Yes, yes, we we
That
we
goes around.
swapped.
So, that's true between you and me too. At the
Well, man,
land,
yeah, you and me, and me and Sue.
yeah,
Sue worked
yeah.
for me, and then Sue became my boss. So yes,
There's a lot of switching hats. Speaking of
yeah,
hats,
yeah,
I think I think that's actually one of uh, the things that a lot of people don't understand and don't appreciate how we as a group, the TSR family, we very often would switch points in the hierarchy, and it was not problematic. People understood the different. It's just a different job.
yeah. Yep. Some of us, I liked being a team leader when I could because I'm when I'm designing, 80% of my time is scribbling on pieces of paper, and then I'm rushing at the end to get the thing written in the last 20% of the time. That's why so much of my stuff has co-authors. Those authors are actually my take Harold's notes and make sense of it. Um, Tom Oldvay is listed on the brown copy of, I think the color brown copy of Hidden Shrine of Tomoachin because he took my notes and my rewrites and actually typed them up. Um, Aaron Alston on Tales of the Lance,
Mm,
uh, which I did most of the conception. Nowadays, I couldn't tell you what I did and what Aaron did. I mean, I think they mesh very well. Um, but a lot of my products, because I was always managing, I would have to steal time to write,
right.
and we were initially hourly, and you weren't supposed to work off site. Though eventually I got
Right.
that changed too.
Well, lo and behold, we've already passed an hour, so I'm gonna set this aside right now. And those of you watching, I'm gonna finish it off screen because of deadlines. Just kind of catch up business because of deadlines and other things last week. I still haven't finished last week's drawing, but it's almost done, and I'll be posting that in the next couple of days. And then I'll work on finishing this one. But you know what? I feel pretty good that I've gotten 25 before that happened, and the first 25 got done. Little behind the ball now, but easy enough to catch up. So I'll finish this, and I will post it. If you are subscribed to the free newsletter, 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com, you will be the first to see it when it's done. You'll get early access and other kinds of behind the scenes stuff. So please consider joining the free, I say it again, free newsletter, 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. So I'm going to take it back to just you and me here. Oh, this is true with everyone I talk with, but you've got so many stories that I feel like we have only just scratched the surface. Um, but we're gonna because I don't want to keep you here all night, and because I want to leave people wanting more. We're going to segue into the question of the 50th anniversary. So we're here. We've been talking about a lot of things that go back to the dawn of D&D and
Yeah,
all the way up to today and this Gen Con, what's going to be happening. Um,
yeah.
what do you have any particular thoughts or insights that we've reached 50 years at this stage? This game that started as those little white books.
Well, I've been only freelancing for the last 20 years, so it has been interesting to be back in the industry. I haven't missed a Gen Con. I'm part of their staff, but I haven't really seen till in the last few years all this evolution and change in Dungeons and Dragons. And as a event provider, I know first edition, second edition, original edition, third edition, 3.5, fourth edition, fifth edition, now beyond. I have to be aware of all these. So I've seen some things. I think fifth edition was very well written.
Mhm.
I don't agree with some of their rules. I believe death is a part of the cycle, and anything that says to players your characters can survive is not doing us justice. But I think there's been a lot of growth. I wonder sometimes if we wouldn't grow more and have a bigger audience if there was a lower price point. We got into the game at $10 for a box set, and
Right.
now you have to pay $150 to $200 to get into this game. There is more available funds for children, but that's a big bite. So I wonder, could we be doing better if we were elsewhere? Now, there are computer games. We didn't have those. Now we do. We've redrawn that. I I believe that there's been so much change that we should celebrate that, and we should celebrate it in town. And as a matter of fact, we are. Last year, I did a soft run of something called Dragon Days,
Right.
and
Now,
it's a
when you
celebration
say in town, you are talking about
in
Lake
Lake
Geneva,
Geneva.
Wisconsin.
In Lake Geneva, the birthplace of the game that changed the world.
Yep.
And what I'm looking at is to examine, not do just a game convention. It's not a convention, it's a festival of many other festivals. We have a book track
Mm.
because TSR, from the lowly days of uh, endless quest books to the publication of novels, became one of the biggest publishers of fantasy and science fiction in North America.
It's true.
Dragonlance is a good sign. Just look at the 200 some odd books in that series. It's huge, the biggest series ever published. Sometimes I remember people saying to me, well, we can't write another story. There's nothing else to tell. And I'd say, well, what about telling the story of the villains? Or what about this? And they go, oh, I guess there are more stories. So they would. Um, we're looking at that. I have actually a Renaissance fair that's part of this. This is the last weekend of September. I have a movie festival. I have two gaming fronts. The Gygax Memorial Fund has helped put together a display that is now an official part of the Lake Geneva Museum called the Wizard of Games. It's all about Gary. And of course, there's Gary Con, and this weekend there's Egg Con, EGG, Eric, Ernie Gary Gygax. And all of these things are trying to say to the town, who took a long time to understand,
Yeah.
that there are millions and millions, 50 million easy, gamers out there.
Right.
And then take all the book fans and you quadruple, quintuple that number, and they all want to go where it was started. And you come to Lake Geneva and you go,
Yeah.
um,
No,
Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm
We're
so
really trying
happy,
to change that.
so happy to see that Lake Geneva, because when I was living there, and for a long time, the city itself didn't really want to embrace
Right.
its history in this way. And I'm glad to see that you Scott Douglas, who was a guest on the show a couple of months ago, was also talking about Dragon Days. Dave Shepard says, "Is that Dragon Dates or Dragon Days? And is there a website?"
Yes, there is. It's Dragon Days dot God. I think it's org, but it may be net.
Dragon Days.
Net.
God, no.
Not org, I think. Dragon Days. If you look it up, it's a festival. There was a Dragon Days that takes place in Boston or the
Right.
East Coast, which has nothing to do with us.
I think that if
But
you were to do a search on Dragon Days and Lake
Lake
Geneva,
Geneva.
Wisconsin. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It'll get you that. But you were saying it's the end of September is when that's happening.
It's the end of September, and we our latest victory in doing things for the memory of Gary Gygax is we just 2 days ago were at the town council, and the new mayor elect officially named, and henceforth the first mayor did it for one day. He is named July 27th, Gary's birthday, as the official Gary Gygax Day in Lake Geneva henceforth.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so we're working at it. We're about to do a Kickstarter for the memorial, which has been designed. We're going to sell the paving stones, which will then help pay for the stone tables and benches and stuff like that.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yep. Yep. And we actually have gotten the city to agree to letting us place it in Library Park, all the way on the west end, where we have a bench that's dedicated to Gary. And you'll be able to come and play Dungeons and Dragons on the table with
That's
Gary.
awesome. So if you're going there in between, there are some things to see, but there's more in the works.
The Gygax family did put a plaque in around the fountain, and Gary's memorial stone is in the graveyard. So we're trying to really make it a citywide thing, and maybe we should be the Gaming Hall of Fame or the role-playing Gaming Hall of Fame. That's what Lake
Why not?
should be. Sure,
that would be terrific.
I want to make that my legacy.
Well, Harold, you, as we've been talking about, you deserve a legacy on top of helping to make sure that there's one for Gary. You are, as Michael Pastor said, you are truly an unsung hero, and I think that you're one of the names that you're on a bunch of books. People kind of know you, but these conversations always remind me how much, if I could work my will, how much better known you and your contribution would be to the history of D&D.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to keep you too long. We've gone a little over an hour, but I would love to have you back again sometime, because I know you've got at least another hour in you.
Oh, no. Let me tell you a short story. Okay. They came to me to talk about 50 years of D&D, or 30 years of D&D.
Right.
And they called me and said, "We want to interview you. It'll take an hour." I said, "No, it'll take 2 hours. And in those 2 hours, all you're going to be able to get is a list of the things you're going to want to talk to me about."
Right.
And it took 5 2 to 3 hour sessions for them to get the information.
Yeah.
And if you look at the back of the 30 years book, there's they quote a book that doesn't exist from Harold Johnson, Me and D&D. So yeah, I have a few stories.
So folks who are going to be at Gen Con, look for that fedora.
I'll be in the auction.
Harold will be in the auction mostly, but he'll be around the show. Right. Stop by and say hi to him. Tell him how much you appreciate everything Harold has done for the game to promote. And one of the things that I think is key about a lot of these stories, they weren't about I did. They were like, I helped so and so do, or I had this idea and I encouraged it rather than grabbing it to myself. I said, Zeb, this is yours. Steve Winter, this is yours. Or work with Tracy. Well, you need me running interference, so you and Margaret. Places where a greedier, a more self-serving person might have tried to hold on to, you have helped to develop and nurture things that have happened. And again, that was also my experience working on your team. And I know that I've said this to you in person, but now I'm going to say it here on the internet. Thank you, Harold. You were a terrific boss, and I learned a lot from you.
Thanks.
All right, so you hold on. I'm going to take you off screen and do an outro, and then you and I can do a quick goodbye on our own. But thank you for being on the show. I've really appreciated it, and I love hearing your stories.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, thank you to Harold. That was, again, hour just flies by, and I have many times been entertained for hours just kind of asking Harold, what about this? So I really will try to get him back again to do this, because I think that everyone should benefit from that, not just me. Thank you all for watching. This has been another terrific hour. We had a lot of big name people in our audience. That makes me feel good. This is a fun show. I hope those of you watching on replay, leave a message. Give us a like. You know what? I don't do this enough. This is why I'm not a great internet star. Hey, wherever you're watching this, give it a thumbs up. Give it a like. Please subscribe. Tell your friends. It's very helpful. As I will often say, it's not so that I feel good about myself, though it does have that result too. It's because that helps to get YouTube and Facebook and any of the other sites that this is on to understand that people are interacting with it, and therefore it's popular, and they should show more people. And really, that's what it's about, is getting more people to come and join us so we can celebrate the history of D&D and role-playing as a hobby. So again, if you are enjoying the show, you probably would like to get the free newsletter, 50 Years in the Dungeon.substack.com. Go on and sign up. There are, of course, paid levels, and I would appreciate it if you consider that. But get in there for free. That's where the basic good stuff is. You get to see everything early. You get behind-the-scenes info, and I don't know, I'll make some other stuff. Oh, you do get access to buying. Oh, here's the thing. I didn't tell anyone about this. I'm going to do a special video on this soon, a short one. But I have finally succeeded in getting prints of most of the pieces that we've already done. So those are going to be for sale only to subscribers. So you got to be a subscriber if you want to get one. Also, everyone who is a subscriber each month, and going back, I'm going to retroactively say, for each month that this has been around, one of the subscribers, I will randomly generate a number and pick one of them to get a free art print. And if you are one of the paid level, the higher paid levels, you get one every month for free. Well, not for free, as part of your subscription. So consider that. That's nice. I will be back next week with another interview. In fact, I believe someone who was in our chat today is going to be my guest next week. So I'm not going to say who, but come on back and find out. Tomorrow night, I'll be back with an episode of Random Encounters, which is my improv cartooning show. And I will not be at Gen Con. Harold will. If you're going, I hope you have a good time. Think of me. Maybe take a picture, send it to me online. I will be here doing the stuff and making internet fun for us all. So until next week, thank you very much, everyone, and